So welcome and thank you for joining us for a community conversation on housing. I'm Kate Lipper-Garabedian, the state representative for the 32nd Middlesex District, which includes Melrose, Wakefield, and Malden. In this role, I work with my district's housing authorities, city and town planners, housing advocates, and relevant executive branch agencies. I also support constituents dealing with housing insecurity. Tonight's event will provide an opportunity for us to hear from housing experts and advocates on housing challenges in the Commonwealth, existing programs and resources, and the necessary policies to create a more sustainable, affordable Commonwealth. I'm pleased to host the Community Conversations series to bring together a diverse group of people from a wide variety of backgrounds. With that, I'm excited to review our time together. After I briefly introduce our esteemed panelists, we'll hear from Taylor Shutt at Housing Families about individuals the organization has served, and from a first-time homebuyer who was supported in the process by a local housing counseling organization. I'll then set the context for our panel discussion before turning to the panelists for their remarks. Thereafter, we'll address questions submitted in advance by attendees and then close with further resources for learning. I'm so very grateful to be joined this evening by a panel of esteemed experts and advocates in the housing and development community. Eric Shupin is the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities Chief of Policy. Before joining the Executive Office, he served as the Director of Public Policy at the Citizens Housing and Planning Association. In his professional roles, Eric has worked to promote affordable housing, community development, and homelessness prevention. Deborah Burke is the Director of the City of Malden's Strategic Planning and Community Development Office. Formerly serving as the Malden Redevelopment Director, Debbie has played an integral role in housing operations, community planning and development, transportation development, and affordability of housing within Malden. Abhi Kurvi is the Deputy Director of Public Policy at the Citizens Housing and Planning Association. Her work emphasizes the intersectionality of housing health, economic mobility, and nutrition. She's a longtime advocate and proponent of sustainable, affordable housing. Elliot Schmiedel serves as the Director for the Home Ownership Division of the Massachusetts Housing Partnership. He has over 12 years of experience in advancing home ownership, homelessness prevention, and foreclosure prevention. Actually, we just talked about this, over 15 years. Felicia Marshall is the Director of Housing Supports at Metro Housing Boston. She previously worked for the Department of Housing and Community Development as the Director of Contracts and Compliance and the Director of Hotel Motel Field Operations, and at Housing Families as the Director of Housing-Based Services. Thank you all for being here. I'm really looking forward to your remarks. I'm pleased now to turn to remarks provided by Taylor Shutt from Housing Families to humanize the policy discussion that will follow, reinforcing the strength and resilience of individuals and particularly renters seeking housing stability. Housing Families, based in Malden, serves families and individuals in the 32nd Middlesex District and Greater Boston area. The legislative delegation has been pleased over the years to support Housing Families with state funding, most recently, for example, a $100,000 earmark in the fiscal year 24 budget. Housing Families services include emergency shelter placement, permanent supportive housing, housing case management, counseling, food assistance, and legal assistance. Its work is incredibly important in ensuring that the needs and supports of clients are being met while maintaining their dignity.
Hi, my name is Taylor Shutt. I'm a staff attorney at Housing Families. I provide free eviction defense and other housing-related legal services, meaning my clients are often from our most vulnerable communities. We all know the pandemic caused catastrophic wage losses for millions. Meanwhile, rent prices in Massachusetts have skyrocketed, leaving many unable to pay rent, especially among already vulnerable populations. Tenants with limited English skills are especially vulnerable. They struggle to understand court processes and to access resources like rental assistance or legal services. For many, they can't read notices that are sent only in English, including court documents telling them about their eviction cases. If they don't understand the court notice, then they miss court, and a default judgment gives the landlord permission to evict them. I recently helped a tenant avoid being evicted for non-payment who had poor conditions in her apartment. It's been a long and painful process for her because she's deaf. That means English is her second language, and she struggles with reading as a result. When she couldn't pay her rent because she had to replace food and household items that were damaged by leaks and infestation, an eviction was started. It took months to get her housing stabilized, and that stability is tenuous at best. The landlord waived some of her unpaid rent, but she was turned down for RAF to help pay the balance because they said her need wasn't related to COVID. Even when a tenant's at fault in an eviction case, it's frequently related to disabilities, mental health concerns, or other stigmas. I've worked with tenants accused of fighting with property management who actually needed accommodations for their PTSD. Another tenant was being bullied by a neighbor for being transgendered and then discriminated against by her landlord, who chose to evict her as the problem tenant. Where a landlord sees a tenant that's not maintaining a clean apartment or is hoarding, I've seen tenants with physical limitations or anxiety disorders that can be managed with supportive services, patience, and understanding. And sometimes people just have bad luck, like the single mom I met who takes care of her teenagers and her elderly disabled mother. She works and goes to school full time. She doesn't ask for help because she knows her skin tone and her accent already make people judge her. Despite all her hard work caring for her family, she just learned her landlord of the last 15 years wants her to move out so he can sell the property. She can't afford a broker's fee or the upfront cost of moving. She can't afford market rent in the area either. But she makes too much money to qualify for emergency family shelter, and it could take years to get a subsidy. The system just doesn't have enough help to go around. Even when we turn to welfare services, SNAP doesn't cover other necessities like toiletries or even toilet paper. Unemployment benefits aren't enough to make ends meet for someone who could barely afford their rent while working. Disability benefits can take a year or more to be approved. Here at Housing Families, we try to bridge the gap for our clients, whether it's cleaning supplies, extra food, backpacks full of school supplies, or even gifts for the holidays. But for every family we can help, there are many more who aren't getting the support they need, which is what makes conversations like this one so important. Thank you for your time.
I'm also honored to raise up the voice of one first-time Massachusetts homebuyer who shares her recent process to home ownership with assistance from a local housing counseling organization and loan program opportunities.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marcia Finkelstein, and I am the proud owner of a 40B unit that I purchased over a year ago. I am here to testify about my experience. First thing that I experienced was the support that I received from the first-time homebuyers class that I attended through Medford Community Housing. Susan Collins was the first point of contact I had at the organization. This was during COVID, so it was all remote, and it helped me a lot as I was going on this journey 2 years ago. And I ended up buying the unit in June of 2022. And throughout that time, receiving support and advice and counseling from her really, really made the difference for me. Learning about different grant programs like the Equity Builders and doing my own research for other down payment assistance programs like the one in the town that I ended up moving to really helped me leverage a great deal of resources to help make my final loan way more affordable. And another piece that can be really daunting for a first-time homebuyer like myself is just the application process. Like all that paperwork that needs to be filled out, even though some of it's very repetitive for the different parties, can be very overwhelming for people. And so I just want to make sure that you're aware that that could be a barrier, and that doesn't have to be. The other piece is the loan itself. Because of my income, I qualified for the Mass Housing Partnership One mortgage, and I had to figure out, again, I tapped into Susan's knowledge to figure out which lenders participate, because the information is not easily and readily available. And so I had to figure it out, and I ended up going with a lender who was knowledgeable about it, and she helped submit the application for me, and I was approved. And she wasn't always on the same page with me about how to package it and layer it with the other sources of down payment assistance grants. And so it felt like a lot of work, but it all worked out at the end. But it's really important that lenders and all the other parties involved in that purchase are well versed in these pieces, because it will help that process go much smoother, get more people into home ownership opportunities, and like me, be able to come out the other side after some time with real equity. And I never thought in a million years that I would be able to buy my own home. And so now, knowing that I will walk away whenever I move on to the next thing with actual equity really just makes me really happy. And I love being a first-time homebuyer, and I'm really glad to be able to testify for you. And thank you so much.
Great. Thank you. So this is actually my second community conversation on housing. The first occurred in 2020 and was focused on pandemic-era housing policies and protections. Given the ongoing need for solutions to Massachusetts' housing crisis and recognition by the electorate that this remains a top concern, I'm glad to make space for another conversation on housing. I want to acknowledge that housing instability is a global geopolitical issue with significant intersectionality with immigration policy set at the federal level. Of course, we are seeing that here in Massachusetts with the increase in migrant families arriving in the state. That global context warrants its own separate examination through a necessarily federal lens. Our conversation tonight is grounded in the recognition that housing availability was a challenge before the pandemic, and it remains so, far beyond the recent migrant influx. In fact, in a briefing just last week with the Lieutenant Governor, we heard that nearly 2/3 of the more than 60,000 families in the emergency shelter system are Massachusetts residents. Across the 32nd Middlesex District and the state, there exists a need for more housing, not only more affordable housing, but housing for all income levels. The insufficient supply of housing has pushed the average rental burden for residents and the average home buyer down payment to national highs. Data also confirm that housing challenges are not borne equally, with bias and discrimination present in the system. In terms of supply across the state, we know thousands of families and individuals are not able to find sufficient housing. We simply have not kept up with the demand. Massachusetts lags behind 40 other states in terms of our housing stock and is more than 40% below the national average for housing production. We thus have the fourth highest property values in the nation and the lowest vacancy rates for both rental and homeowner properties. This creates a real challenge as the Commonwealth looks to support the expansion of biotech, pharmaceutical, and other high-growth industries and attract 21st century businesses and their employees to the state. We want the housing market to be a source of economic strength and opportunity, but our supply is not keeping up with our economic ambitions. And there is a concern that residents and workers may decide to seek work and permanence in other states where the challenge of finding housing is not so daunting. It's been more than 20 years since I took an Econ 101 class, but I remember that classic interplay of supply, demand, and cost. The high cost of housing in Massachusetts is a natural result of our lack of supply. The National Low-Income Housing Coalition reports that half of all low-income renter households and 1 in 5 middle-income renter households in Massachusetts are cost-burdened or severely cost-burdened. 31% of renter households are extremely low income, and within these households, more than half of household income goes toward rental payments. Housing costs affect home buyers, obviously, as well. The ability to afford a home feels like it's becoming slighter and slighter. Mortgage rates are about double what they were last year, with single-family home prices continuing to abrade the path to home ownership. Achieving home ownership, as we just heard from one of the testimonials, is a major lever for establishing intergenerational wealth. And with so many families unable to become home owners, I'm concerned, I think, as all of us are, about racial wealth gaps and other gaps exacerbating. In light of this landscape, state and local policymakers, practitioners, and advocates are striving to identify opportunities to address the housing crisis. So in my first year as a state representative, I was glad to join the legislature in passing the first zoning reforms Massachusetts had seen in decades. Among them, the Housing Choice Initiative enables cities and towns to lower a historic supermajority requirement for approving zoning changes to a simple majority. Another important component of that economic development law was the requirement that municipalities served by the MBTA establish at least one district for multi-unit development by right. Additionally, in the years that have followed, I've been proud to support budgets that fund important housing programs and resources, including some I anticipate our panel will discuss. For example, in this year's fiscal year 24 budget, we invest in the Massachusetts Rental Voucher Program, residential assistance for families in transition, and public housing. Additionally, we made permanent a pandemic-era protection against eviction for residents where there is a pending application for emergency rental assistance under RAFT or any other program administered by the state, a municipality, or a nonprofit or entity. Further, with the blessing of the state legislature, a new executive office of housing and livable communities with us tonight was established this year. It raises the status of housing by creating a secretariat level office solely focused on housing. In terms of future prospective work. More than 6,600 bills were filed to start the current legislative session. 162 of them were assigned to the Joint Committee on Housing, with notable pieces of legislation, including the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, an act to establish an Office of Fair Housing and a Fair Housing Trust Fund, and income tax credits for affordable housing units. Housing-related bills also are being considered in many other committees. In fact, of the 2 bills that I filed this session, one, an act updating and expanding the renter's income tax deduction, has been assigned to the Revenue Committee. And in fact, the proposal in that bill to increase the rental tax deduction was included and engrossed by both the House and Senate in separate tax reform bills that are now in conference committee. A second bill that I filed, an act to improve municipal access to existing housing data, the IMAGE Act, would direct the executive office to create an accessible database with accurate and detailed information about each community's affordable housing stock. Housing advocates and organizations across the state, including Metro Housing Boston, CHAPA, and the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, with which I worked on the IMAGE Act, have identified priority bills that they support this session. In addition to your your elected state officials, Massachusetts residents can look to executive branch agencies for regulatory and policymaking activities, to local officials for efforts close to home, and to housing organizations for guidance and programmatic resources that enhance opportunities and protections when it comes to housing. I'm really pleased now to turn over to our panel of esteemed housing experts to speak about the critical work in which they engage to support families and individuals across Massachusetts. And I'd love to start with you, Eric, talking a little bit about the new executive office and the policies that you're leading on to work on sustainable, affordable, accessible housing. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, Representative, and thank you so much for inviting me to participate on behalf of our new Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. It's a really incredible opportunity to make housing the priority that it needs to be, and it's certainly something that Governor Healy and Lieutenant Governor Driscoll and working under now Secretary Ed Augustus that we're able to focus on every day, as you said. You framed the challenges that we face really well, and it's no surprise to anyone. We don't have to convince. I mean, half the battle there is we don't have to convince anyone that we have a crisis. That literally there's an emergency declaration right now due to the emergency assistance family shelter system. The number of families you mentioned, or you put up on the screen, 6,300 families and growing every day. That's over 24,000 people. And each one of those are families with children. So when we think about the work that we do, that certainly provides that motivation, that inspiration to do everything that we can to address our housing challenges. You also talked about the opportunities that we have, and I think we're in a really exciting place. We have Governor Healy, who said, on the campaign trail, I'm going to create an executive office of housing, and now we're here. We're 107 days in for the Office of Housing, and we are counting. And we want to demonstrate the difference that we're going to make. Like, what is the difference that we have in Office of Housing now? And that's why having a committed governor, having Secretary Augustus and Lieutenant Governor, we're working to really have, address the 200,000 homes that we know we need created by the end of the decade to meet demand. We're working to make our family shelter system, get that under control and make homelessness rare, brief, and occurring very infrequently. And we have new tools and policies and resources to do that. You talk about the MBTA Communities Act that was passed. That's something that Governor Healy is committed to implementing fully. That's going to open up potentially 200,000 new homes of zoning capacity, of communities around public transportation, smart growth, homes that can be built, hopefully once the zoning is in place. You talked about the state budget and some of the really great successes there, increased funding for MRVP. That's going to help us create this year alone 750 new vouchers. And allow us to make vouchers like the Alternative Housing Voucher Program, which serves persons with disability, not only create new vouchers, which we anticipate about 150 new vouchers being created, but also for the first time ever having that program, which again serves persons with disabilities, build new, deeply affordable and accessible housing. There's also increased resources for public housing, and something that the governor and lieutenant governor are committed to doing everything we can to preserve that precious resource of over 43,000 public housing homes, something that's unique to Massachusetts and something we can be really proud of. On top of that, we're looking at what, beyond that, what's next? And of course, we have legislation that the administration is working on, that we're working on very much at the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities in the form of housing bond bill. This is a piece of legislation that really needs to be filed and passed every 5 years, and provides resources for all of our affordable housing programs that build and preserve affordable housing as well as public housing. And Governor Healy is really seeing this as an opportunity to make a statement on housing and to meet the moment. The Lieutenant Governor has been using the word, we need a housing moonshot. And so we think that this is our opportunity, along with the legislature, working closely with you there, to meet the moment. And so we're excited to be able to hopefully roll out that package soon. I don't want to get ahead of my boss and bosses, the secretary, lieutenant governor, and governor. But we are looking to file an exciting package of resources and policies by the end of the month that we really think are going to help put us on track to address our housing challenges and create that competitive Commonwealth that we know we are, and providing the jobs and the homes for people and our workers. And so we're excited to do that, and to hopefully come back and talk with you about what's in that package real soon. So thanks again for having me.
Thanks so much, Eric. Really appreciate it. And if you do want to smatter in a few insights, hear her first. We'll keep it a little quiet. Let's turn now to Debbie over at the City of Malden. Obviously, it's really critical to have strong state leadership on issues around housing. And at the same time, we know that municipal governments and local leadership can make a big difference in meeting the housing needs of our local communities. So Debbie, I'd love for you to share a little bit about what's been going on in Malden, and really appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Representative, for hosting this. Eric, if you can put my name at the top of the list for those funding opportunities, we're always looking for new ones. So, and we have a grant writer on staff, so we can submit an application. I have to say that, this job has taught you one thing, and it's to be nimble, depending upon, what is going on out there. And I think COVID in particular, kind of really focused the problem for Malden in terms of people having issues with housing, but it just became more front and center with us. And, we had just come off having a housing needs assessment done by the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, which, has some, startling statistics in it. It notes that 40% of Malden residents are housing cost burden. And that means that they're paying more than 30% of their monthly income on housing costs, and therefore are more at risk of displacement vis-a-vis, eviction or being priced out. It also noted that 56% of Malden residents earn less than 80% of the area median income and will qualify for affordable housing. And then 25%, which is 1 in 4 of Malden residents, earn less than 30% area median income, which puts them in the, classification as extremely low income. So with that, being said, the mayor of Malden, Mayor Gary Christensen, works together with our team, and felt a few years ago that, we really needed to start advancing some affordable housing strategies to meet the needs of the, residents in the community. And, so at that time, we advanced policies, maybe going back 3 years now, that we created an affordable housing trust fund. The city did not have that. And we have initially funded it with some mitigation fees from local developers and are looking at other ways to grow that fund, including we recently got an allocation from the Community Preservation Committee. We also established the city did not have one. And some of these conversations, as you know, in municipalities or at the state level, are not always the easiest to have in terms of housing. Everybody has different philosophies and viewpoints on it. But, we finally did get consensus over this Affordable Housing Trust Fund and the inclusionary zoning. And I think it was because of it was a more comprehensive and deliberative rollout of these programs and a willingness to have as many conversations as we needed to have with stakeholders in terms of trying to get buy-in that these policies be created. We finally, after establishing IZ, maybe 2 years ago now, we finally have 2 projects that are coming out of the ground that will have, inclusionary zoning units. So that requires a 15% have to be affordable of any development, 8 units or more. And I'll talk later about this. That's in direct conflict with the state's new MBTA community zoning, although we've learned that we can apply for a waiver because their zoning only requires a 10% affordability requirement, as I understand it. And, we want to get it to the 15 with a waiver potential, hopefully, so that our ordinance is starting to talk to each other so that under one ordinance, you don't have to do this requirement in terms of affordability, and which is different than that. So to us, it makes sense to try to get that waiver if we can. In addition to that, during COVID, we used, and again, some of these are one-time resources, so we're going to have to look at how we identify funding in the future, but we used, we had several $100,000 worth of money through the Community Development Block Grant Program, and we were able to use that. We spent, I think it was $500,000 on an eviction prevention program, as well as we gave income eligible residents, they could apply for a month's worth of rental assistance. We also used some of the funds during that time. There were efforts by a couple of the major landlords to really up prices on their tenants, and some couple of really large apartment buildings in the city that we were able to, surprisingly, but get the landlords to the table at the mayor's urging and negotiate an agreement where we did subsidize some of the landlords' operating costs with a signed legal agreement that they would keep those rents at, a certain level for at least a year. So we did, it wasn't a permanent cure, but it was at least a stopgap measure at that time, particularly when we were in, lockdown. We also used some of the COVID money. The 2 folks that spoke on video, they're right. Applications are daunting, even the applications that we have in the city for housing rehab programs or to get federal community development block grant. They're multiple pages. Most of them are in English. So we did finally, to try to help people through that, we've done 2 things. We did create an Office of Housing Stability recently, and that right now is being run by, it was interesting to see the first speaker run by the housing families. And they can bring, attorneys and others to the table to assist residents working through, say, an eviction process or other issues with their tenants. And I'm drawing a blank on the other thing that we did, but it will probably come to me. But I mean, that's been critical, and that's been operational, for a couple of years. The other thing is we have purchased new software so that we're more or less, our agency, a point of contact for all the city programs that help with housing. So as I said, we run a housing rehab program. We run a lead paint abatement program, all for low income homeowners. But if the homeowner is over income and they can point to the fact and show statements that their tenants are low income, we can help and assist that household with lead paint abatement. And we also have a Healthy Homes grant for things like, ridding a home of radon, etc. And then we operate a home program, which is a federal program that we are the lead agency for 8 cities and towns. And that actually our agency got the largest opera award to a home program. in the New England region just recently that we're going to use those funds. We broke it down into 2 buckets for supportive services and rental housing development where low-income people live, and also for the creation of additional rental housing for extremely low-income people. So, those are some of the things, but the software that we created now comes on and it's one portal. So you don't have to decide if you're a resident out there, oh my goodness, what application am I supposed to be applying for? The home program, the CDBG program, they all have acronyms, it's an alphabet soup of programs. This just takes the person's application and we vet that and try to match it up with the applicable program, which is probably more in line with what the state does, but we're new to the party in terms of, trying to make it as streamlined as possible. So, and then I guess finally, before we move on to the next thing is, the city looks at, trying to provide housing at, to a diverse community at varying price points. So, we out of the box a few years ago readily embraced and were successful in using Housing Development Incentive Program funds known as HDIP to create market rate housing in our downtown, which is a gateway city. And that, creation of that development, we were able to get, as Representative, kind of a reimagining of our entire downtown Malden, because that brought a large mixed-use development that was able to benefit from, tax credits and tax write-offs from HDIP, and it really unlocked our whole downtown for, economic revitalization. So, we are trying to chase all the different programs, and we're working now to comply, although the deadline's coming upon us with that MBTA community zoning, and we will have something done in time for the December 31st deadline. So thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. That's an incredible menu of things that other cities and towns could be thinking about. Really impressive. I'm glad you brought up HDIP. That's something that the House recently took a vote to do a sizable increase in that as well. So really glad that people can hear and digest all the things that Malden's working on and think what could also work in their communities. And really proud to be representing you in the city. Let's go to Avi now to hear a little bit about CHAPA's vision in terms of an advocacy organization considering policy levers to move this housing crisis and some of the intersecting policy areas that are really impacting housing. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Representative, and I'm really glad to be here and be a part of this conversation. We are really excited to have this conversation and are very excited about the things that are coming into Massachusetts. And I just want to take a moment to sort of reflect on Massachusetts has always been a leader on so many things. And right now, housing is sort of the single best investment we can make in our communities to secure that future and make sure that we are building on that future. And it's still a very vibrant place where people want to come because that is our strength. And we want to build upon that. And housing is a way to do that. That puts housing as an issue or as a resource at the center of everything. And addressing housing affordability in Commonwealth, what that means is that children can live next to their grandparents. Schools can have teachers that live in the same community. Young families can build a future here. Stores have customers. Businesses are thriving. College graduates are coming back to the homes. Hospitals have nurses, and seniors are able to age in place with dignity. And people with any disability can remain in those communities. That is what housing means. It's not just about units and numbers, but it is about people's lives and what they are able to do when they have an affordable, safe place to call home. Right now, many people are shut out from the home buying process. Many are struggling to pay rent, and many are making difficult choices between rent and food or rent and healthcare. What we can do when we have an abundance of housing or enough housing for everyone is that people do not have to make these hard choices. We also have to acknowledge that many restrictive housing policies have led us to having a housing shortage, and many of our solutions have to sort of address that. There has never been a better moment to put Massachusetts on a path of equity, resilience, and sustainability through housing. And we have, thanks to the legislature, thanks to the administration, we have many new tools for zoning to produce more homes. There are growing corporate commitments to housing and renewed federal focus and investments as well. And we need to leverage that. That is, as Eric said, to meet the moment. That is what this moment needs. And we can do it. We have done it before. Massachusetts has been a leader, and we need to do that again. We all need to come together to do that. CHAPA has set out with a goal of 200,000 homes. We are very happy to align with the governor on that. What we also aim to do under those 200,000 homes goal is specifically call out 40,000 affordable homes. And by affordable, I mean anything that requires subsidy to produce. And out of those 40,000, also make sure we are building 20,000 homes that are affordable for those with extremely low incomes, because those are the people who are the first ones to get shut out of any process when there is when there are any hardships or recession or pandemics. They are the ones to get the most hit. And so making sure that we are addressing their needs, and we are creating homes that they can afford as well, and putting out resources for doing that. While we are one of the unique statewide advocacy groups that represent the entire housing system, we have more than 12,000 members, ranging from tenants, members, business groups, and housing advocates, other housing administrators, and a whole range of housing related stakeholders. And so what we are trying to do through this is just get together the housing ecosystem to do this work, because it's not going to be just one entity or a singular solution that's going to address it all. It's going to take all of us together to forward this goal. We are also a trusted convener and consensus builder with a wide range of interests to make sure that our state and local communities enact and invest in smart policies. It has to make sense for every community. It also has to make sense economically, and that is what will make sure that we are moving forward in a resilient way. We have an extensive policy agenda. I'm happy to share our full policy agenda from our website, but to bring it down, we are focusing on our 4P strategies, which is to increase production, to preserve the affordability for tenants, and plan for growth. And it's all sort of all of these efforts are for people. So it's production, preservation, planning for the people, because they are at the center of all of these policies, geared towards achieving housing stability for everyone in Massachusetts. We are currently working in more than 40 communities to help implement the MBTA multifamily law. We are so glad to see that came through, because that is exactly what was needed. It removed a barrier that was present for that would help move forward the needle on housing production. Now is the time to implement it, and we are definitely working with many communities to help them, support them, provide assistance in moving forward on that goal. We are also advocating, of course, for the housing bond bill. Once we have sort of the zoning tool, when we have the bond bill, that will sort of put in place the resources needed to sort of get this production going, especially affordable housing production. What the housing bond bill will do is basically provide resources for production of affordable housing along with market rate. And so that is something that we see as matching of policy and resources. So we have one piece in place. Getting the housing bond bill will bring another puzzle piece into the picture, and that is how we move forward. We are also production, although I understand, is sort of gets to the heart of the problem, but it takes time for homes to get produced and for people to move in. And so in the meantime, we need to work on rental assistance, expanding rental assistance programs, making sure they are reaching deeper and ensuring tenant stabilization and helping tenants in a better way, also increasing the number of families it serves. And although we are always advocating for more, I also want to take a moment to acknowledge how far we have come from these rental assistance programs, which were a few decades ago at 10 million, 20 million, which are now at 200 million and are helping so thousands of more families across Massachusetts. And these are the programs that really ensure housing stability and prevent homelessness across Massachusetts. And we need to strengthen them. And we are so happy and thankful to the legislature for having more investments in these programs, but also working on improving these programs and making them more attuned with today's needs. And to the government for implementing them in those ways. We're also advocating for eviction prevention policies like improving access to counsel to provide legal representation for tenants facing evictions. Because in many cases, you know that landlords have or property owners have far higher legal representations than tenants, in which case they are likely to get evicted sometimes because they are not able to pay rent, but many a times with no fault of their own. And so having legal representation can also ensure housing stability. We are also working to advocate for establishing a statewide office of fair housing to address housing discrimination. Massachusetts is sort of a leader in terms of having fair housing laws, but it's also important to have resources to enforce them and implement them, and having a statewide office of fair housing can really help with that. And also protect the rights of public housing residents. Public housing is a great resource. We are one of the few states to have our state public housing. To preserve that stock, it's going to take a lot more investment, which again, we look to the housing bond bill, but also preserving not just the housing stock, but the residents and their health and safety who are living in those public housing units. And so those are some of the things we are working on. We appeal to the entire community to join this effort and be a part of designing communities so that they are vibrant and thriving, and we can all benefit from a healthy, growing housing ecosystem. And so I'm going to end that with just an appeal to everyone to join this effort and advocate for these policies that benefit us all to have a vibrant future here in Massachusetts.
Thanks so much, Avi. And to your point, people can also, we'll put up at the end sort of where people can go to learn more information and take a closer look at some of those policy levers that you've referenced, including on your website. So great. I want to turn now to Elliot and Felicia, and maybe we'll start with Elliot. As people, as you know, or representatives of organizations that are actually helping residents on the ground, like the one we heard from earlier and the ones we heard about through Housing Families, sort of talk to us a little bit about what that work looks like and how people, I guess in your case, Elliot, who are looking to become first-time home buyers, what are some observations that you have? What are some resources that exist for people like that? And thank you again for being here.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity. Glad to be here to talk about the housing challenges that we face as a Commonwealth, especially those as they pertain to purchasing one's first home. So I think that testimonial that we heard earlier was spot on. It was so well done. And I'll just try to elaborate a little bit on some of the important points that were relayed to help clarify, how prospective home buyers navigate the system, find information, and ultimately achieve their dream of home ownership. First and foremost, it's no secret to anybody just how historically difficult it is to buy a home in Massachusetts right now. Prices are very high, inventory is low, interest rates are the highest they've been in over 20 years. So it's really created a perfect storm for first-time home buyers. Because of those challenges, I think that it's critical that we create and provide affordable homeownership options. Those include readily available and accessible homebuyer education classes, affordable properties for purchase, special mortgage financing programs, and down payment assistance programs. So I'll kind of talk a little bit about each one of those four buckets. First off, how to get educated and find information. So CHAPA, where Avi works, and of course where Eric worked previously, is a great organization that manages a network of nearly 50 nonprofit organizations statewide, and those organizations provide homebuyer education and counseling. The classes themselves provide incredibly valuable information to help people prepare themselves for one of, if not, the biggest financial decision of their lives. Within these classes, folks hear from real estate agents, mortgage loan officers, attorneys, home inspectors, and other professionals involved in the process. And those folks can help really answer your questions, help you prepare for home ownership. CHAPA also hosts a website called mymasshome.org. And that website provides people with a centralized source of information about some of the state-sponsored home buying opportunities that I'm about to talk about, some of the financing options and down payment assistance programs. So I'd encourage everybody to check out mymasshome.org if and when you have a chance. On the affordable property front, the market is really expensive. As I mentioned, the median price in Greater Boston, $750,000. Certainly difficult to find a place, but that doesn't mean options don't exist. I always encourage first-time homebuyers to think broadly about their options. That might mean exploring different neighborhoods, different cities, different towns, or even different property types like condos and 2 and 3 family properties. Local cities and towns do develop affordable homeownership opportunities. In many places, these are referred to, as the testimonial said, 40B properties. And they are few and far between, but they offer prospective buyers a great opportunity to purchase their first home at an affordable price. Next up, I would just make mention of some special state-sponsored mortgage financing programs. Where I work at the Mass Housing Partnership, or MHP, we offer the One Mortgage and the One Plus Boston mortgage programs. These programs are infused with state dollars and local dollars to help reduce interest rates, eliminate private mortgage insurance, and ultimately monthly savings with these programs can amount to several $100s a month. Several $100s a month in savings for a low to moderate income household can mean purchasing your first home or not purchasing your first home, and it makes a huge difference. These programs are available to income eligible households across the state. And we have a long track record, long history of serving socially disadvantaged households at a very high rate. Additionally, our sister agency, the Mass Housing Finance Agency, or Mass Housing, offers a series of affordable options to help low and moderate income households buy their first home as well. And then the last piece I'll mention is down payment assistance. I think both locally, statewide, nationally, down payment assistance has become the driver of getting first-time home buyers into their first homes. MHP and Mass Housing have partnered most recently on a program called Mass Dreams. Mass Dreams provides down payment and closing cost assistance for first-time home buyers who, if not for this assistance, probably would find it nearly impossible to buy. We've created a refined delivery system for these programs, and we're currently working with our partners in state government to find additional resources to fund these programs and hopefully carry them forward. The Federal Home Loan Bank of Boston offers a few different down payment assistance programs of their own, and as well as localities, cities and towns, through home funds or CDBG funds. So I'll just end by saying, research is critical, informing oneself is critical, and it all starts with the first-time home buyer class. I think we are we're a unique state to offer so many dedicated, approved, educators and classes, and people really need to seek out those classes, take advantage of them. And if just by doing that, they'll put themselves in a good position from the start. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elliot. That's really helpful and really dovetails nicely with the testimonial we heard earlier. And now, Felicia, if you wanted to just highlight, the work that Metro Housing Boston is doing and the ways in which you're trying to assist residents with accessing some of the rental assistance programs that are out there, that'd be really helpful. Thank you for being here. Really glad to have you. And make sure you come off mute. So Felicia, there you go.
Thank you for the invite tonight. I really appreciate being here and to be able to speak about some of the services and the work that Metro Housing does. We spend our time preventing and addressing homelessness. We want to work with individuals and families that are need some assistance to be able to navigate that world. So we do a lot of prevention of evictions and we find suitable homes for individuals. We also do some work with folks in our financial literacy program to help them achieve some long-term economic stability. We accomplish all of this work through all of our programs that are all connected and work to support individuals. Some programs that we have that are not necessarily always highlighted at Metro Housing, but are really key to helping individuals would be the following programs. One would be our supported intensive programs and services. And so that's our SIPS program, which provides supported services and housing search assistance to individuals who have difficulty navigating that housing world by themselves. And so they receive that extra intensive one-on-one support, which allows the case manager to be at the briefings for them, to be at hearings, and also to advocate with them, to be in the field with them, looking at units and really giving them that one-on-one assistance that they need. We also partner with management companies and other community-based programs to be able to offer our co-location sites. And currently we're in 11 sites throughout the greater Boston area. And the way that I think of co-locations is it's taking Metro services and bringing them to the community so the community doesn't necessarily have to always come to Metro. So we set up in those locations and we offer all of the services that are here at Metro through our co-locations program. And then we have our housing and education and consumer program, which is a program that definitely allows individuals to be able to seek knowledge and understanding around the housing and also around some of the financial assistance. We offer workshops. We do brief counseling there, and we also offer assistance for our RAFT program through this department as well. In FY23, the average benefit for RAF was about $5,200 per household, and that was for Malden, which we served about 380 families. And then Melrose, we served about 60 families and 50 families in Wakefield through our RAF program. We also have additional programs like our Continuum of Care program, which offers supported housing. So this program comes with the case management services. You have a voucher program because we administer rental assistance vouchers here at Metro. And so you receive a voucher, but in addition to that voucher, you receive a case manager to sort of help you navigate that world, which is also similar to our Home and Healthy for Good program. Again, another program that addresses individual homelessness, and it also provides an intensive case manager to help someone as well. I think what we do or how we do what we do and is important. We take the approach of meeting people where they're at, and it doesn't matter what your current situation is. There's some program at Metro that we can provide you with some kind of support, and so we make an effort to meet people where they're at and to be able to provide them with resources and assistance to help them meet their needs. I would say that our impact that we have is resolving housing challenges. And again, we do that through some of those programs, but having the assistance of our staff to be able to provide that one-on-one assistance to individuals is just really important. Making homes safer and rents affordable. Metro believes that that just creating housing just isn't enough. That we absolutely have to have the creation of housing within a certain income limit, and that's going to be key to addressing the affordability issue that most of our families face here at Metro that we serve. I would also like to just share that the families that are participating in our program all are doing so voluntarily, and the services are free and free to them. So they don't have to provide any financial assistance to Metro to receive any of these services. We continue to resolve, housing challenges. And again, like I shared earlier through our Housing Hub program, we are helping families with eviction, and we also are helping families through a program that is fairly new to Metro, and it's our Accountable Care Organizations, our ACO program. And this is another intensive case management program. It's through Mass Health and Flex Services, which allows us to work with people who are medically complicated and to be able to offer them housing assistance, case management, and financial assistance through that ACO program. We also have the Fair Housing Project here at Metro, and we also have we've also have made homes safer through our programs to help people with disabilities stay in their home. We have the loan program here at Metro. The last program that I didn't mention that we also have is a program of home that helps prevent homelessness in the housing, and that's through our stabilization program. So families that work work in this program receive an additional 12 months of services once they're in their community or their homes. And so Metro assigns a case manager to those individuals, and they're able to assist them with their living in their new community and helping them connect to community-based services in the program.
Great. Thank you, Felicia. That's quite a comprehensive overview. And again, when we get to the final slide, people will be able to confirm where they can go to learn more. I know that I've often reached out to your organization for assistance with particular constituents who are, struggling with making rent or trying to find a place to use their voucher. And it's an important, you provide great support for those individuals, and obviously for many, many more, not only in my district, but throughout this region. So thank you. So I know we're running up on the hour, but I'm hoping we can stick around for maybe 10 or so more minutes just to get some insights from you all on some of the questions that have surfaced from, people who registered, and your own materials and perspectives have really sort of informed these questions, and maybe we'll just go through them really quickly. And certainly, you can chime in if you have a thought on these, and if you don't need to feel obliged to respond to each one. But I think one question is around just data, and I heard a lot from you all about numbers of people you're supporting, the number of units that we need. I'm curious in your thoughts about just how we need to continue to really lean in on accurate and updated housing data to inform the decisions we're making around development and affordability. Another question that I think comes to mind for many of us is, we know that there is a production issue. We've heard about the shortages and we can see them, and we've talked about that at length. And I think, Avi, you talked about this a little bit, but is increasing the supply of housing alone sufficient? And obviously, just saying we have a goal, we also need the resources to accomplish that. That's something we're thinking about with this bond bill, and that the legislature has been working on with HDIP and those sorts of things. Are there other necessary policy levers that we need to be considering for attending to this issue? We talked a lot and heard a lot from Elliot and Felicia about sort of the administration of these different loan programs or rental assistance programs or protections that exist. Are there ways that we can better streamline the services and resources that exist for our constituents who are navigating among all these different organizations and programs? And Debbie, the idea of sort of a centralized software portal is one example of trying to break down some of these silos. And then finally, what are some key policies and programs that you want to we should be focusing on for advancing rental and homeownership equity when that comes to racial equity, socioeconomic, age, disabilities, folks who might not have access to software and technology. So I'm not quite sure how to handle this. We could spend an hour on each one of these questions. If somebody feels really strongly about sort of responding to one or several of these, I'm just going to maybe open it up, and we'll maybe take 10 more minutes just to sort of surface additional conversation before we close out, if everyone could do that with your time. So thanks. And Hill, if you want to we'll put that down so we can all see each other a little bit better. So any thoughts on either data or better, addressing equity gaps, thinking about supply or other policy levers, or just streamlining and supporting residents who are sort of trying to navigate through what can be a really thorny and complex system?
Can I weigh in on the policy lever one?
Yeah.
This has come to mind. The housing crisis, right, is not just, one city's problem or a couple of cities, and it's 351 cities and towns that make up Massachusetts. And we in Malden have done things like inclusionary zoning. We're working with Mass Housing right now through their neighborhood hub program, and trying to take what are on the city's problem property list, trying to acquire those properties with ARPA funds and some assistance from Mass Housing, and then sell those properties once rehabbed off to as affordable housing and permanently deed restricted if we could. But I can't feel that Malden shouldn't alone be, working on this in a vacuum. I mean, there city leadership and myself feel that the city has, embraced transit-oriented development. I mean, we've brought over 1,000 units of new housing, to the downtown within a very short period of time. And, I just don't know if you have MBTA community zoning. It doesn't seem that 40B has been successful in making a dent in, the affordable home ownership supply, that I don't know if something like a mandatory statewide inclusionary zoning policy would be something, because there are, towns and others that, don't seem to be, participating as much as a community like Malden has done, in terms of doing, providing as much as affordable housing and also home ownership opportunities that we can. So, maybe a little pressure in that regard, that, communities that don't subscribe to it, potentially could be, mandated too.
Okay, that's a good perspective. And we think about that in a lot of statewide programming and policy making, of sort of how much do we make sure that everyone has a stake in the conversation and a responsibility. So that's a good sort of framing consideration for anything we're considering. Thanks for putting that out there.
Okay.
Just to follow up on Debbie's remarks, and to also address the data question. So MHP puts out a lot of great data and tools, and they had put out this tool called Todex, which looked at the transit-oriented development. And from that sort of flowed that sort of supported the need for the MBTA multifamily law, where it showed that there was very less number of homes around the transit stops, be it bus stations or T stations. And so that is where the policy formed, where we do need to require communities with transit access to have more, at least allow for more multifamily. Just having zoning does not build more homes, but unless you have the zoning, it's impossible to build those homes. And so we are really glad to see that law is not just an optional thing, but communities have to comply or they lose a lot of state funding. So policies like these can really make an impact, but it also takes time to implement them. And so I feel like things like those can really are like prime examples of data-driven policy, and that is something that we definitely look at, while also making sure we have the equity lens of looking at who are those things serving, who are those developments serving, and we can look at best practices, even happening in Boston many times, that is asking for developments to look at who are the populations that you are displacing and who are the populations that will move into the new developments and things like that. So many of those policies are in the works. Legalizing ADUs across the state are some of those things that can open up a few more options for more housing. And once we have a larger stock, that automatically will help stabilize, if not reduce rents, at least stabilize rents. But we also, and again, we hear a lot that just increasing housing stock may not address the rent issue, but unless we have resources for affordable housing, and unless we have more stock, adequate housing, you're not going to make a dent. And so we do need large number of homes just that are being able to be created for addressing that issue. That's my sort of for each of those questions a little bit.
Very impressive. Good work. Thank you.
I think I can talk quickly on the data piece. It's so important to know, to be able to, what are your goals? Are you making progress towards them? If not, what do we need to do to change our policies, to change our programs, how we administer to meet those goals? And so both in the goal setting and then measuring against those goals, that's fundamental to addressing our housing challenges. And so one of the things that we've done as a new executive agency for the first time, we just hired someone who is the chief of data and research at the executive office to look at exactly these things. And so we're excited to build that capacity within our own executive office, and then help make that data informed policy decision making. Other things that we'll look at, the governor's given us the charge of building more faster, more housing faster, and more housing across all income levels. It's not just building for building's sake. And so as part of that, we are absolutely at the Office of Housing and Livable Communities looking at what are those barriers to production and preservation. We've talked a lot about zoning. MBTA communities is one thing. Are there other things out there? How can we make it easier for communities to do things like, inclusionary zoning so that we have dedicated, deed restricted, affordable housing as part of anything we build. We're looking at state-owned land. That's something that was also announced when the Secretariat was created, of looking at our state surplus land and how much of it can we put to use for housing. So reducing those barriers to production and preservation, but then also looking at what are the tenant protections, what do residents need, what are the fair housing implications of the work that we're doing. And so looking how to support those fair housing efforts, how to protect tenants from evictions or from the consequences of being evicted. And then supporting our cities and towns. This is something that the governor has absolutely made a priority, providing local tools and the support that communities need so that, Debbie, you can do your work. And we can help you get through the new programs or requirements through robust technical assistance, because we know that's where the work is done at the local level. So what local tools do you need to do your job and to build more affordable housing? That's a question we're absolutely asking ourselves. So all of these things together, again, are just items that are important to our office and to the governor and things that we look forward to working on, so that again we build more faster, but more for everybody across all income levels.
Great.
I'd love to just add to a little bit of what Eric said on the homeownership production piece. As a state, we've found ways to successfully subsidize 40Bs and inclusionary zoning units, deed restricted affordable properties, which represent sort of the lower end of the market. And private developers will always find a way to finance the construction of, multi-million dollar plus sort of, mini mansions. But there's a missing middle. We have not, nobody's building the 3-bed, 2-bath starter home anymore because the economy of scale is just not there. And the math is harder to get to. So I think that when we talk about options across the income spectrum, in terms of home ownership, building new opportunities across that middle band is going to be critical. And finding the right places to do it, obviously, is one of the biggest challenges.
Thanks for putting that out there. And that's what kind of goes to the data question too, about being able to see the nuances in the production that exists and where there are gaps. Great. Anyone else want to weigh in before we close?
I can weigh on question 3.
Sure.
Metro believes that we do this through collaboration. I think that's the way that we can address streamlining services. We recently have connected with UniteUs from UniteUs.com, which is an agency that has software to help identify participant needs. There's a live chat feature in it. You're able to see what agencies offer. And once the participant is in the system, you're also, as an advocate, able to see where they're applying and other agencies where they're receiving services for, so that you're not duplicating any services in time, and you can collaborate with those other agencies if you're working with someone. And I think that streamlines the process, and it prevents the participant from telling their story over and over again to each agency. If we have a way that we're all working or connecting in one software to tell us the story.
That's great. Right. I mean, and the slide that we're going to put up, I think now maybe in terms of closing out, there is a resource that I've created and periodically updated with my office around housing supports and programs that exist. And in the course of sort of researching that, it's definitely been, helpful to highlight to constituents where you can go, where there's one link that takes you to a form that works for however many numbers of, for example, housing authority buildings, so that you're not going town and city to city. You can, in fact, sort of have a centralized place to access, in this case, one type of housing. But to your point, Felicia, there are opportunities, and the legislature is exploring that through policy opportunities as well. A sort of, you fill out an application for one benefit program. Is there a way to streamline that so it suffices for others also? So I'm really glad you pointed that out. And it's also very encouraging and not surprising to hear that people at every level of this work, including at the municipal level, when we heard from Debbie earlier, are thinking about this and trying to come up with ways to make the interfacing better, easier, and therefore more effective for the people who are so deserving of accessing these types of resources. So I want to thank each of you again for joining me tonight. And to those of you who will be viewing this community conversation, whether in real time or in the days to come, anyone can contact our offices, and you can see how to do that for assistance or additional information. On my website, I do have this resource that lists out different housing supports that you or someone you know may find helpful. Please stay tuned for the recording of this discussion and for all upcoming community conversation events. Thank you so much and be well.